founders Marcus and Joni Lamb from 2007 to 2011. And in that role, she saw up close and personal not just what happened at Daystar TV, but also within the Lamb family.
Joni Lamb's Daystar empire has been rocked to its core after explosive new revelations from investigative journalist Julie Roys. In a shocking leak, Roys uncovers a hidden secret that could forever alter the future of Daystar and its powerful leaders. What has been concealed for years is now out in the open, and the truth is more startling than anyone could have imagined. This game-changing discovery is shaking the foundation of one of the most influential Christian media empires. What will happen next? Stay tuned. For years, Joni Lamb was the face of Daystar TV, a beloved figure in Christian media, known for her warm smile, inspirational messages, and unwavering faith. She became a symbol of hope and strength for millions of viewers. Her show, full of uplifting prayers and stories of miracles, brought comfort to many. After the death of her husband, Marcus Lamb, Joni continued the mission they had built together, guiding the ministry through sorrow and loss. To those who tuned in, she wasn't just a TV personality, she was family, someone they trusted, someone they believed in. But behind the scenes, things were not as they appeared. Julie Roys, an investigative journalist who had worked with the Lambs years earlier, began to dig deeper into the operations of Daystar. What she found was shocking. What had seemed like a humble ministry focused on spreading faith and helping others was actually functioning more like a business empire. It wasn't just about spreading the gospel, it was about making money, accumulating wealth, and maintaining a carefully crafted image. Julie had been close to the Lambs. She understood the inner workings of the ministry. But as she began asking questions, the picture started to change. She uncovered troubling signs that the lavish lifestyle of the Daystar leadership didn't match the ministry's message. Donations from loyal viewers who believed they were contributing to a good cause were allegedly being used for things that had nothing to do with the ministry's mission. Private jets, luxury travel, and expensive dinners. These were not the kind of things you would expect to see in a ministry that was supposed to be about service, humility, and faith. The most shocking discovery was the purchase of a private jet. Daystar claimed it was for the purpose of global outreach, helping Joni and other leaders travel quickly to spread the word of God. But Julie's investigation revealed that the jet was often used for personal comfort. The jet wasn't just flying people to missions, it was being used for vacations, personal trips, and other activities that had little to do with the gospel. As Julie dug deeper, she found that this kind of behavior wasn't an isolated incident. It was a pattern. Daystar had been operating with very little financial transparency. Because they were classified as a church, they didn't have to disclose their financial records to the public. This gave them the freedom to operate without oversight, and it allowed the money to flow unchecked. Meanwhile, the people who donated their hard-earned money, trusting that it was going to support important missions and ministries, were kept in the dark about where that money was really going. The gap between the public image of Daystar, led by Joni Lamb, the epitome of grace, and the reality of what was happening behind the scenes couldn't have been wider. To the public, Joni was a beacon of faith, someone who had built an empire of hope. But behind closed doors, Daystar was behaving more like a corporation concerned with maintaining a glossy image and accumulating wealth, rather than fulfilling the spiritual mission it claimed to support. As the truth began to surface, it shattered the illusion that Joni had worked so hard to build. For years, she had been the face of faith, someone millions of people admired and trusted. But now, that image was beginning to crumble. The empire that had once seemed like a beacon of hope now seemed more like a facade, hiding the truth of its true nature. The public's trust in Joni and the ministry was shaken, and the gap between what people thought they knew and the reality of what was happening became impossible to ignore. For many people, Daystar TV was a place of refuge. They tuned in every day to hear Joni Lamb's comforting words, to see her pray, and to find hope in the midst of life's challenges. For years, Daystar had built an image of being a humble ministry focused on spreading faith, helping those in need, and staying true to Christian values. But behind this carefully crafted image, something darker was taking shape, something that was about to be exposed in a way that would shake the foundation of the ministry to its core. Julie Roys, an investigative journalist, had once worked with the Lamb family. She had been close to them, trusted them, and seen how the ministry operated from the inside. But as she began to look deeper into Daystar, she started to notice things that didn't sit right with her. Julie wasn't just some outsider making accusations. She knew the Lambs personally. She knew how the ministry had grown and how it had operated, at least on the surface. But as she dug deeper, she found that there was a troubling disconnect between the public image of Daystar and the reality of its finances. It all started with the money. Donations from loyal viewers, many of whom had been following Daystar for years, were the lifeblood of the ministry. These donations were meant to fund missions, prayer programs, community outreach, and other charitable activities. People believed they were giving to a cause that would help spread the gospel and make a difference in the world. But what Julie uncovered was something that no one could have imagined. Behind the scenes, Daystar had been using those donations in ways that went far beyond the ministry's mission. It wasn't just about helping people. It wasn't about spreading faith or supporting missions. It was about spending money on luxury, comfort, and power. The ministry had begun to operate more like a business than a nonprofit, with leaders living in the lap of luxury while the people who donated their hard-earned money were left in the dark. Julie discovered that a significant portion of the donations was being funneled into luxury travel and high-end lifestyle choices. Daystar had purchased a private jet. At first, the ministry claimed that the jet was for global outreach, a way to get Joni and other Daystar leaders to far-flung locations quickly so they could preach the gospel and spread the word of God. But Julie's investigation revealed that this wasn't the case at all. The jet wasn't just being used for ministry purposes. It was being used for personal comfort, for trips that had nothing to do with spreading the gospel. This wasn't just a one-off incident. Julie found that luxury spending was pervasive throughout the ministry. Expensive dinners, lavish wardrobes, and other extravagant purchases were all being paid for with the money that had been donated by loyal viewers who believed they were supporting a cause greater than themselves. The image of Daystar as a humble ministry was nothing more than a facade. Behind the polished broadcasts and inspirational prayers, there was a very different reality. As Julie continued her investigation, she discovered a disturbing pattern. The money was not being spent on what the viewers thought it was. Daystar had become a ministry in name only. In practice, it was a business empire, one focused on maintaining its own image and accumulating wealth. The more Julie dug, the worse the picture became. She found evidence of financial mismanagement, manipulation, and a complete disregard for the people who were footing the bill. One of the most shocking aspects of the financial mismanagement at Daystar was how the ministry used fear and guilt to drive donations. During live telethons, the ministry would urge viewers to give large sums of money, promising them that they would receive blessings in return. They used emotionally charged language, telling people that their donations would bring miracles into their lives. For some viewers, these messages were too powerful to ignore. They believed that if they gave, they would receive a divine reward. But Julie discovered that this kind of manipulation was happening on a regular basis. One heartbreaking story came from a former employee who used to answer phones during these telethons. The employee recalled an elderly woman who called in crying, saying that she was deeply in debt and had no money left. But despite her financial struggles, the woman decided to give her last $1,000 to Daystar because she had been told that if she did, God would bless her with 10 times that amount in return. The employee who took the call felt sick running the woman's credit card. She knew it was wrong, but she was under pressure to keep the donations coming in. She had been trained to convince people to give, no matter their financial situation. This was a moment that stuck with her long after she left the ministry. It was the first time she questioned whether Daystar was really doing God's work or whether it was simply using religion to manipulate people into giving. As Julie uncovered more about Daystar's financial practices, she also learned that the ministry had been operating with little to no transparency. Because Daystar was classified as a church, it was not required to publicly disclose its financial records. This meant that the people who were donating their money had no way of knowing how it was being spent. The lack of oversight allowed the leadership to continue their lavish lifestyle without anyone asking questions. Julie's investigation revealed discrepancies in how the donations were being tracked. There were inconsistencies in donor reports, and former employees spoke out about how fundraising goals were often pushed harder during times of crisis. This was when the emotional manipulation was at its worst. The ministry would play on people's fears, telling them that the ministry needed their financial support more than ever. The message was clear: give now, or the ministry might not survive. The political angle also added another layer to the growing scandal. Julie discovered that Daystar had strong political ties, especially during election years. While the ministry claimed to be apolitical, it was clear that it was using its platform to push certain political agendas. Daystar's leaders made appearances at political rallies, and some of the programming seemed designed to sway voters. This blurred the lines between ministry and politics, further eroding the trust of viewers who had believed they were supporting a faith-based organization, not a political powerhouse. As Julie's findings continued to pile up, the backlash from Daystar's supporters grew louder. Some viewers refused to believe the allegations, dismissing them as attacks on the ministry. They defended the Lamb family, insisting that Daystar was doing God's work, even if the leadership had made a few mistakes. Others, however, felt deeply betrayed. They had given their money with the belief that they were supporting a ministry that was making a real difference in the world. Now they realized that much of that money had been used for luxury, political influence, and personal gain. Daystar tried to deflect the growing criticism. Joni Lamb made a few public statements, but they only raised more questions. She denied using ministry funds for personal expenses, including her honeymoon, and claimed that the private jet was only used for global outreach. But her explanations were vague and lacked transparency. The ministry refused to open its books, and the silence only fueled the anger and distrust of those who had supported them for years. As the scandal continued to unfold, it became clear that Daystar had lost the trust of many of its supporters. The ministry's image had been shattered, and the financial mismanagement and manipulation that had been hidden for so long were finally brought into the light. For many people, it was a painful realization that they had been deceived. The money they had given in good faith had been used for things that had nothing to do with the ministry's stated mission. The truth about Daystar was out, and the damage was done. The ministry would never be the same again. The financial mismanagement, the emotional manipulation, and the lack of transparency had forever altered the way people viewed Joni Lamb and her ministry. The scandal would leave a lasting impact, not just on Daystar, but on the broader Christian media landscape. For many viewers, it raised important questions about the true nature of Christian ministries and the importance of financial accountability in organizations that rely on the donations of their supporters. For years, Joni Lamb had been seen as a trusted figure in Christian media. Her gentle voice, comforting prayers, and messages of hope had reached millions of viewers. Daystar TV, the network she helped build with her late husband Marcus, was more than just a television station. It was a beacon of faith for many people. Viewers saw Joni as the symbol of strength and grace, the kind of leader who led with faith, not just words. For them, Daystar was more than just a ministry. It was like family. They gave their donations, believing they were supporting a cause that would bring good to the world. They prayed with Joni and felt like she was part of their daily lives. But all of that began to change when investigative journalist Julie Roys started digging into the inner workings of Daystar. What she uncovered wasn't just a minor mistake or a simple misunderstanding. It was a series of revelations that shook the very foundation of the ministry. Julie's investigation revealed that much of the money donated to Daystar, money given with the hope that it would go toward helping others and spreading faith, had been used for things that had little or nothing to do with the ministry's mission. There were reports of lavish spending on private jets, luxury travel, expensive dinners, and other personal indulgences. This wasn't the humble ministry that viewers had been led to believe. Instead, it was a powerful empire, one that appeared to be more concerned with maintaining its glossy public image than with the principles of faith and charity it had once championed. At first, many supporters of Daystar couldn't believe what they were hearing. The news seemed so out of character for the ministry they had loved for so long. How could Joni, the woman they had trusted, the woman who had prayed with them and shared their grief, be involved in something like this? They had believed in her, in Daystar, and in the work the network was doing. For many, the idea that Joni could be part of a scandal like this felt like a betrayal. It was like someone they had considered family had suddenly turned into a stranger. But the evidence continued to pour in. Julie's investigation revealed not just lavish spending, but also manipulative fundraising practices that preyed on the emotions of viewers. During telethons, when viewers called in to donate, they were told that their contributions would bring them blessings, healing, and prosperity. They were promised that their donations would lead to miracles, but the reality was far different. One former employee who had worked during the telethons recalled a particularly heartbreaking story. An elderly woman called in, crying and saying that she was deep in debt and had no money left, but she was still going to give her last $1,000 to Daystar because she had been promised that God would bless her tenfold. The employee who took the call described feeling sick running the woman's credit card information. She knew something wasn't right, but she was under pressure to keep the donations coming in. The whole situation felt like manipulation, not ministry. As more details came to light, the public backlash grew. The trust that had once been placed in Joni Lamb and Daystar began to erode. Viewers who had seen Daystar as a symbol of faith and purity felt betrayed. They had given their money, their time, and their trust, believing that they were supporting something good. But now they were questioning everything. Was Joni really the woman they thought she was? Was Daystar truly the ministry it claimed to be, or had they been part of something far less noble? The silence from Daystar only made things worse. Instead of taking immediate responsibility or offering clear explanations, the network and Joni responded with vague statements and carefully worded assurances that everything was fine behind the scenes. Joni denied using ministry funds for personal expenses, including her honeymoon, and insisted that the private jet was used for global outreach. But the answers were always evasive. There were no detailed financial reports, no transparency, and no apologies. For many, this lack of accountability was just as damaging as the revelations themselves. It felt as though Joni and the leadership of Daystar were trying to cover up the truth instead of owning up to their mistakes. The silence from the Lamb family and Daystar's leadership felt like an admission of guilt. The more the network avoided the hard questions, the louder the public's concerns grew. People who had once defended Daystar found themselves questioning everything they had believed. Some viewers even began pulling their donations, while others simply stopped watching the network altogether. For the first time, the trust that had been built over years of ministry was gone. People who had seen Daystar as a symbol of hope and faith now saw it as just another brand, one that was focused on image, power, and wealth. The ministry's message of generosity and humility now seemed like a facade, but the backlash wasn't just limited to viewers. Many churches that had once aired Daystar programming began to distance themselves from the network. Pastors who had supported the Lambs, who had spoken highly of their work, now found themselves at a crossroads. Some churches quickly pulled Daystar's content from their services, citing concerns over financial transparency and ethical conduct. Others hesitated, unsure of what to believe. They didn't want to rush to judgment, but the evidence kept piling up, and it was hard to ignore. The division among supporters of Daystar became more pronounced. Some defended Joni, insisting that she was being unfairly attacked. They argued that the Lambs were doing God's work and that the accusations were part of a larger campaign to bring down a Christian voice. They saw the criticism as spiritual warfare, an attack on faith itself. On the other hand, there were those who felt deeply betrayed. They couldn't overlook the evidence. They couldn't ignore the stories of financial mismanagement, the luxury spending, and the emotional manipulation. For them, the trust they had placed in Joni and Daystar had been shattered. They weren't trying to tear down the ministry. They simply wanted answers, transparency, and accountability. The divide among viewers, churches, and former supporters of Daystar grew deeper with each passing day. Some people remained loyal, holding on to the belief that the Lambs had been misrepresented and misunderstood. Others began to withdraw, quietly stepping away from a ministry that no longer felt like it was about faith, but about something else entirely. For many, the pain of betrayal was too much to bear. The idea that they had supported a ministry that was operating in such a way, spending donations on personal luxuries while preaching generosity and faith, was a hard pill to swallow. The damage to Daystar's reputation wasn't just about the money. It was about trust, and once that trust was broken, it was almost impossible to rebuild. The backlash wasn't just an angry response to financial mismanagement. It was a response to a deeper sense of betrayal. People had believed in Daystar. They had believed in Joni. They had trusted them with their donations, their prayers, and their time. And when that trust was broken, it felt like a betrayal of their faith. The scandal at Daystar became a defining moment for many viewers. It raised questions about the nature of Christian ministries and how they operate. It forced people to reconsider what they were supporting and why. It made them think twice about the leaders they followed, the organizations they trusted, and the ministries they contributed to. And for Joni Lamb and Daystar, the public backlash would continue to haunt them for years to come. The trust that had taken so long to build was now gone, and the road to rebuilding it seemed nearly impossible. The public had spoken, and the truth could no longer be ignored.